My story, I've realized, and to just give you the brief summary of it, is the most common story I've heard, especially when it comes to those who fall into addiction. Even more dangerous than the drugs themselves when that started was the lies and the secrets that I was harboring. I experienced some excruciatingly dark and horrible things, where I put myself, places I had to go, people I had to be with, things I ended up doing. The greatest lie about addiction is that they have to want it for themselves. My entire recovery, I spoke loudly about it. I decided that I was going to recover loudly so others didn't die quietly.
Welcome to Let Me Tell You, a podcast where people share their experiences with trial and heartache in order to bring comfort, hope, and inspiration to others. I'm really, really excited about this episode. I've talked before, I listen to podcasts all the time. I always have an AirPod in and I listen to all different types. And one topic that I love to listen to podcasts about is about addiction recovery. It's a world that just fascinates me, honestly. And it was a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, that I came across this Instagram, and it was, this is Danny Deaton. Let me just introduce you, Danny. I came across your Instagram, and it was your mugshot. That was the Instagram story. Sorry.
Everything goes uphill from there. It's like, all right.
Exactly. It just gets better. It just gets better. But it was your story, and I couldn't, like, get past it. I was just fascinated by it, and then what you do now is, you had your journey through addiction, but then a lot of people, I think, turn around and wanna help people through it, but you have taken that to a new level of wanting to help families, which I think is the coolest part. And I have to tell you, I told my mom, who you were and that you were coming on, and I said, he works with families of addicts and tries to help them, and she goes, "Well, where was he, when we needed him with" so I lost my oldest sister to addiction, some mental health issues, and then it ultimately addiction. And we could have used you, like, I mean, that was, I don't know how many years ago, 14 years ago. It was a long time ago before you were doing all this. But I wanted to have you on because first of all, I need everyone to hear your story because it's just an amazing story. But then I definitely want we'll get into what you're doing now. So yeah, if you'll go ahead and just start tell us your story.
I'd love to, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm grateful to be able to tell the story with an ending that unfortunately a lot don't. And I'm sorry about your sister. Um, it's actually the motivation that I have to keep doing this crazy line of work. So I sometimes I'm hesitant to share my story because I'm like, I just rather talk about what we're doing now, but there's a reason why. And in order to do the line of work that I do and to be effective at it, first of all, to be as crazy as you have to be to do it. And then second of all, to be effective at it, the story it gives context as to why. But you know what you shared that your mother said is it's something that I hear far too often. I wish I wish we would have had this or known what to do when, something happened with the family. And so we'll get into that after, but it's why I wholeheartedly believe that the greatest threat in the world to addiction is a family. However, a family that effectively intervenes, but also understands recovery. So in order for them to do that, they have to be educated themselves, but we'll get into that. You know, my story, I've realized, and to just give you the brief summary of it, is the most common story I've heard, especially when it comes to those who fall into addiction. I think sometimes when people hear the word addiction, if you were to ask, describe what an addict or a drunk looks like, I think we're getting further in society where people describe it more accurately. But in the past, it used to be like this person that nobody could relate with, right? And the truth is most of those that fall into addiction were the people who did have a good life, where they were the person people like to be around. They were a light. They were the life of, any situation they entered. So it ends up being a pretty common story. But mine in a nutshell was I I never experienced trauma that started my addiction. I'm a big believer that it's either trauma that starts your addiction or you find trauma during your addiction. And in some cases, the addiction starts because of some real stupid choices. And that's kind of my story. Like
Okay.
dumb choices that could have been avoided, but they weren't.
Yeah.
And over time, the progression removes that ability to choose. So, my story was I had a great childhood. I grew up in Utah. I was a rambunctious boy. I was one of those boys that nowadays they would probably treat with ADHD medication because I was like, couldn't sit still. Every time my parents went to parent teacher conference, they're like, well, he's really sweet and we love having him, but he can't sit still and he's a distraction in the class. But I loved life. I was super active in everything I did. I played lots of different sports. I loved school mainly just to hang out with friends. And when I got older, the incentive to go into school is that's where the most girls were. But I still did it. I liked to learn, but most of all, I liked to socialize and I was active. I had an awesome family. My parents were like, you know, when you get older, your parents are parents and they're always kind of lame for a minute. But my parents were like my heroes. My dad was always, he was like my mentor, all my sports coaches. And he was just, they were just really an incredible influence in my life. So as I kind of grew up loving life, I got to that curious stage in life that we do. We all get there, usually around high school, maybe for some a little sooner. And for heaven's sakes, it's becoming sooner and sooner for kids these days because these stupid devices and whatever they're exposed to constantly. But
Yeah.
back in the good old day where you had to get on your bike and go get in trouble, that's where I grew up. Um, I did. I had some curiosities. I was with friends. We made some choices that we shouldn't. And what I say by that is I still remember the very first time that I drank alcohol. Here I was. My father had been a bishop in our church. I'd grown up in a healthy home. I knew right from wrong. And I remember the first time I was really curious at a party about what these people were doing and why it looked like everyone was having so much fun, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of what they used to portray on like the beer commercials. Like it's just this.
Yeah.
So even though I've been told differently, I'm still kind of like really curious. And I still remember the first time we were in the backyard, one of my friend's house, and his older brother's having a party. There's a lot that's a blur, but I remember that first time. And I was so nervous holding this can of beer that my hand was like shaking. And I was like,
Wow.
and something confusing followed because here I was doing something I knew was wrong and I shouldn't be doing. But there was pretty quickly this very confusing experience. And that was, I did feel good. Like if it
Mhm.
felt really good. Like now for a moment, right? Till I found myself throwing up in the bushes later. But
Yeah.
for a moment, it's almost like, and this is what's hard for some people that never dealt with addiction. Maybe they deal with something different. Some people deal with other challenges.
Yeah.
But for those, there are millions. I mean, at least the Department of Health and Human Services, their most recent report said that there's 46 million known people suffering from addiction, and those have been documented. Those have been actually
Wow.
documented. Most people in addiction are not documented. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that number's four times that or five times that, but when people that are prone to addiction consume these things, what happens is there's an actual like extreme benefit. So here I was, and I think it was probably underlying issues of being restless and ADHD. As soon as I consumed this, I was like, I actually felt like normal. I felt like peaceful. I felt good. So I bring this up because it was super confusing. Here I was doing something I shouldn't, but I also felt really good. So then, of course, being young and dumb, also, that continued on, leading to other things, curiosity being part of it. In the beginning, I was making choices, doing things I knew I shouldn't, but I was confused because now all of a sudden I actually felt like what I'd been trying to find in the world, whether it was in church, at home, in school. I felt whole. I felt complete. I felt peaceful. I felt joyful. That's where it started. And I think for a lot of people it does. It's really confusing.
I have to say, I've heard someone say another, someone who talks about addiction recovery, he said in his mind, growing up in the DARE program, things like that, he thought he believed you take drugs or alcohol and all of a sudden your life is ruined immediately ruined. And so when it wasn't, he was like, wait. what happened? Oh, it's not that, you know? You expect the immediate negative results, and you're getting these immediate positives.
Yep. I shared with this youth group just last week. I was speaking to this group of youth and I said, you guys are too young. But when I was younger, there was a commercial and it had like these eggs and it showed your brain and your brain on drugs. And it was like they were frying and burning. And it was just like, it was traumatizing, that commercial. But like my experience was a lot different. So I share that because I entered this period of my life where it was confusing and all addictions are progressive. But the ironic part is I never saw any form of this. No one ever does. Like, this wasn't a problem. This was just like something that was fun on the side. Well, it progressed. The use became more frequent. It led to other things, started leading into marijuana, doing some psychedelics, doing some other things, being curious still. Looking back, it was obvious that my mind was starting to become programmed to seeking a chemical solution to what I couldn't find or feel on my own. But obviously, when you're in it, that's no one could see that happening.
Yeah.
So that started to happen. My life took several twists and turns. It did. I actually cleaned my life up. I found that I was really miserable. After high school, I moved to Hawaii. Thought I was going to be a pro surfer. Was living out there with some friends. I was actually laying on a beach in Hana, and I just had this like kind of almost like I was hallucinating in a way where I felt like this emptiness. So I got my life together. But what I did is I just stopped. I didn't enter any type of recovery. I stopped. I said, this is it. I'm going to change my life. And I just pivoted in a different direction, came home, actually cleaned up. I went and served a mission for my church, had a great experience, just refocused, and it was working for a period of time. I was committing my life to doing things and helping and serving other people. And it was actually a great distraction from myself when I look back now. And I came home, started to live my life, put things together, and I got into an accident where I'd caused some injury to my back. And I was introduced at that point to a thing called Oxycontin. Now, this was during an opioid epidemic that we created here ourselves, the pharmaceutical companies, um, where doctors were handing out prescriptions to people that was pharmaceutical grade heroin or fentanyl in the form of a pill for any discomfort. And I took that and I was taking that for a good reason because I was in pain and it
Yeah.
was taking the pain away. This is where my story becomes one that's far too common, where millions of people's story almost just morphs into the same. Well, here I was taking this medication for pain. Well, meanwhile, in my life, there were a lot of things. There were challenges. We all have our fears and insecurities. There's relationship challenges, whatever it is. Little did I realize that the medication was numbing all of that as well. So I was using it in the name of pain, physical, but what it was doing far more for me was numbing me out from all these things. Simultaneously, it triggered some of the same learned behaviors I had when I was younger to seek a chemical solution to a spiritual or emotional wound. My story before the mission was kind of more fun and games, like things got a little bad and out of control. But at this point in my life, what started was a path of destruction. Even more dangerous than the drugs themselves when that started was the lies and the secrets that I was harboring and almost starting to live a double life. And I still didn't want people to see things or perceive things. So I was hiding it and covering it up. And all it did was progress. And when I say it progressed, it progressed.
How long do you think you were able to go? I mean, if you remember, how long were you able to go hiding it?
High functioning, yeah,
Yeah,
for a long time, for years, for
really.
many years. And when I say high functioning, I was I had also had, I had developed a pornography addiction, which is very common as for anyone in addiction, but the forefront of the problem was the dependency on opioids and these pain pills. When I say high function, I'm talking about handling all my church responsibilities, graduating from college, like starting a business, an insurance company, getting licensed to do so, really fooling everyone and anyone. And
Crazy.
it is crazy. It's actually, if you speak to anyone in addiction, they probably break it out into different chapters, but like the first 75% of almost anyone's addiction, no one's aware. It's not till that very tail end where things start to unravel. And when it does, then families start to recognize signs. And then consequences usually show up quicker. But yeah, for a long time. So that secret continued. Meanwhile, my dependency started to increase, my tolerance increased, and it just led me down a horrible path. So just to spare you all the boring details, I lost everything. I was married at the time. I had a wife, had no other choice than to leave. Family paralyzed in fear of what was going on. And here I was, I once an Eagle Scout. I had played the piano, multiple sports, served a mission, graduated from college. I found myself living in my car. And you think that would be bad enough, it got worse to where I segued over to illicit drugs, um, began shooting heroin and cocaine. Um, Even now, I look back and you wonder how that is could ever possibly happen. Well, it does.
Did you were I hear a lot of, addicts say, like, I told myself I'd never do I'd never shoot up, I'd never do heroin. Were you one of those too?
It's this delusional stupidity, I call it, because looking back now, and I actually have to burst the bubbles of a few families because they're like, oh, they're just, they're doing this, they're not doing that. And I was like, well, that's actually,
Oh.
it's actually, they'd be smarter to do this. And people are like, what? If you're, for example, I'm abusing Oxycontin, which is pharmaceutical heroin, and it's 25 times the expense. Like,
Yeah.
it's so expensive that people end up ruining themselves financially, robbing, cheating, stealing to get it. It's actually harder to get off of because it has a longer shelf life, and it's there's lots of reasons. So, but yes, I was one of those ones. Where isn't it crazy that you have this delusion that if it's in this sweet little bottle that we're familiar with, it's one thing, but if you go do these other things, truthfully, I wish everyone would get there quicker because then families usually wake up to do something. So mine just got bad, and it got bad. I got really desperate and reckless at the end. And like I said, if my addiction was a 10-chapter book, the first 8 chapters were really boring. Like nothing was going on. The ninth chapter, it started to unravel. And in that last 10th chapter is where things happen that people never fathom. I experienced some excruciatingly dark and horrible things, where I put myself, places I had to go, people I had to be with, things I ended up doing. Most of all, robbing myself of everything I had, selling off everything I had. It all led kind of to a head where even after I got um, locked up for a night or two, caught doing this or that, had the SWAT team kick in my home because they were watching it and thought that they were busting a drug house, which they weren't. But a friend and I decided we got real desperate and we had nothing. We had nothing left to pawn. We had nothing left to do. And so we figured what we were going to do is rob the drug dealers. And this is kind of where things finally came to a head. And chasing the drug dealers around here out in West Valley of Utah, uh, through these neighborhoods. My friend was driving my car that I was living in now, and I was so sick. I don't know if people are familiar, but like when you're dope sick or you're withdrawing from certain chemicals, you can start to have like the shakes really bad. You feel like you're dying. And so I was on the seat really sick and I had my feet up on the dash, and he's flying through these neighborhoods trying to catch him. And, a lot of it's a blur, but I do remember he had a parked car while we were going pretty fast, and it projected me through the windshield. I landed on the hood. Here we are out in this street. I have no windshield. I broke both my legs. I'm sitting here on the street. There's paraphernalia all over in our car, and he basically drove me back to a home where he was staying, put me in the basement of that home, and that's where I laid to die. And I hadn't eaten in days. I weighed 100 pounds. All the veins in my body had turned black. I mean, when you talk about broken, like if you want the poster child of what like a pathetic, broken, hopeless person looks like, I was me. And I laid in that basement for a couple days, and I was preparing to die. I couldn't walk. I don't even think I had water for more than you're capable of going, but somehow that happened. A lot of things had happened on the outside that I wasn't aware of. Mainly that my father and brother had kind of had a premonition or a dream the same night that they were speaking at my funeral. And when they found out from each other that they decided they were going to go find me. Meanwhile, my family had been doing a lot of work with like a treatment center and a recovery coach of learning what it's going to take and how to put boundaries in place and how to prevent. I wasn't aware that they were doing this, but they had done enough work that one thing led to another. And by miracle, they found this guy at a gas station who they knew was with me. He told them where I was. And I remember laying there and I'm laying on this concrete floor, just like my face, like just basically dead. And I see this door open. And when the door opened, there's these two like images that walk in, and it was dark, so I couldn't really see. And I look up and there's my dad. And I was like, whoa. I had so much shame. Like I was so shameful that like, of course I buried my head and I was just like, get out of here. And my brother walked in behind him. My dad had done enough work that I wasn't aware of, that he looked down at me and basically said, if God needs you more than I do, he can have you. But if you're ready, we'll walk through this with you. He didn't scoop me up. He didn't kneel down to try to beg and plead with me, because he had done plenty of that. He had done plenty of that.
Yeah.
So he actually had the courage to turn and walk away.
Man.
And my brother just looking at me like, what are you doing? You're going to die. He's following my dad. And like, as they kind of go to leave and I can see the door shutting, I just said, help. And that was the start of a very long, excruciating, difficult journey that required so many levels of everything. I mean, medical detox, excruciating pain, treatment centers, sober livings, going to court, little more jail time, back in treatment centers. But that was the story that redefined my life. And what's interesting is every time I even share it, I'm just like actually remembering the extent of how bad it got is almost hard to believe.
It's interesting when you said something, and I'm sure that we'll address this later on. When they came in and you recognized who it was, I think families think he'll be so grateful to see us. We're here to help, and you were like, get out of here because of shame. That was so like when you said that, I was like, oh, that means something, because I think that's where families get confused. Like, I'm here to help you, and
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a confusing part. That's why actually, like, when we get into it, why the best of families struggle the hardest when it comes to addiction, because they know that the love and encouragement and support they can give, but what they don't realize is you don't even have to be as bad as I was. Like way before that, even when my family would bring me around because they wanted me to feel loved and supported, like when my addiction was still somewhat functioning, that's where I felt the worst. That's where I felt exposed, where I felt the deepest shame, where I felt the worst about myself. Isn't that ironic? Like, if that's not Satan himself working in a spiritual battle for our soul, as I'm like, he does this thing to where even being around light and the people who love you the most feels the worst. And,
yeah.
but yeah, when they saw me, it wasn't like, hooray, we're here to save you. I was like, get away. Like, I didn't want him to see me. I didn't want him to look at me.
It's just so interesting because you had talked about the desperation, like, "I'm dying. This is it. No one's coming to save me, and I don't have anything." And so, you would just think people would come in and you're like you would think it would be like, "Oh, hallelujah." And instead it's like, "Oh, not well, I wonder what it would have been like if it would have been anybody else, not your family." How do you think you would have reacted?
Differently, but still in denial. It's just a different form, right? Like addiction, addiction's the master liar and manipulator to the person who's sick as well as everyone else. But
Yeah.
it would have still lied that like I didn't need help, like I was okay, but the shame wouldn't have been there. It would have just been different.
Yeah.
So it it would have been someone that would have been easily manipulated, or someone that was enabling me already. That's
Yeah.
why it's just so tricky.
And it makes me think of your tagline, which I know you'll talk about, is "Our secrets keep us sick," right?
It's the root of every addiction. Like people look at these addictions, and honestly, I'm realizing now, like the people who are fortunate and have a chance are the ones whose addictions start to scream loudly, like mine did. There's so many other people suffering in between, and it has nothing to do with the porn or the gambling or the alcohol or the prescription medication. Has no- it- those need to be removed for sure, but it has to do with the secrets they're harboring. And I
Yeah.
think as a society, we don't realize the power of secrets. A secret could be my uncle molested me when I was little, Or it could be a secret that I hear often. I just don't feel like I got the playbook to life. I don't feel like I have friends like other people do. I don't feel like I measure up. That secret, when it's kept inside, just becomes so unbearable that to that person, the weight of that secret is the same weight as someone who's like, yeah, I was physically or sexually abused.
Yeah.
But yet, as society, we discredit one over the other because we feel like one's justified and one's not. But it is the secrets. It's the secrets that keep us sick. So
Yeah.
it was an amazing experience. And if it's okay, like the segue was, I know that my story isn't the same as some people who fall into addiction. There are many people who fall into addiction that unfortunately come from broken homes, maybe abusive homes, maybe where the home was the source of the problem. I understand it. There's also people who fall into addiction who have families that can't help, don't have the means to help. But there are so many who come from goodly parents, come from homes where people tried and they want to help. And that was me. And I realized looking back, I did a lot of hard work, but I never would have done a single bit of it or been able to sustain it or been willing to continue doing it without a family. Without a family that figured out how to utilize boundaries and incentives through the means they had to help. And that became a story I realized was very common, that there were a lot of people like me who did come from good homes, who did have good families, who did have people in their life that wanted to help and support them. But the people in their life are standing there on the sideline going, we don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
why would they know what to do?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And so what's funny too is I got into recovery just like anybody else. I had a pile of wreckage so high. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So one opportunity led to the other. So I found this amazing woman came into my life way before I was ready. She was like amazing and beautiful and successful. And here I was just like crawling out. I have to tell you a story about our first date some other time because I had to fake it till I made it. Oh my goodness. I wasn't ready, but I got ready and I fell in love. We got married and I had to repair life financially and provide for a family. And somebody gave me a chance and I worked really hard. I got into the restaurant business and wasn't by choice. It was just an opportunity that came up. And I spent like 10 years doing the only thing harder than overcoming a drug addiction, which is working in the restaurant business. I don't recommend it.
I've heard that.
Oh my gosh, it's the worst. But about 8 years ago, I said, no, I have a higher calling. The reason why is my entire recovery, I spoke loudly about it. I decided that I was going to recover loudly so others didn't die quietly. And I think people who actually get into recovery, there's a big difference between recovery and sobriety. Sobriety is kind of like the abstinence of it. They're white knuckling it. They're not doing a lot of healing. But those that are become vocal about it and they're proud of it and they scream it from the rooftops. And I decided to do that. And every time I did, especially like at church or something, I might have had a couple people look at me like, but there were 10 times the people who would come secretly after and be like, hey, we don't know where my brother is, or hey, my spouse is still. They're like, what do I do? What do I do? And I realized people were hungry. And so when I went to get licensed to do what I do now and certified as an interventionist, I realized there were hundreds, if not thousands, of resources for people that were in their addiction. But there was almost nothing that was solely dedicated to the family wondering what their role was. And then when I started looking at my own story and figuring out how I made it from a place of humility, I realized, well, I would have never made it without them. And my family was fortunate enough back in the day to go to a program where they had someone like a family coach that kind of helped them through these steps. And that's when I decided to make my focus that, to not only become an interventionist, but to create a fully focused and centered family program where the family 100% teaches them how to effectively intervene, how to set boundaries. The whole purpose of the program is how to present the gift, which is a path forward of recovery, that we have all the details of that plan, but it also includes the boundaries we're doing. And it sounds a lot easier than it is.
Yeah.
But when that family becomes empowered and supported, then their loved one has a chance.
Yeah.
And until they do, everyone in the family is just yo-yoed or affected differently. And the addiction's the only thing that continues thriving. So it's been a crazy, like 7 or 8 years, but I've got to watch and witness so many miracles occur where families who lived in chaos for so long, when they actually sought help, had a plan, united the family, were able to speak to the disease of addiction effectively. It's pretty powerful stuff.
So you just said something that is one of my favorite things. I've been talking about you a lot this week because I've been so excited about this, telling my husband all about everything. And I said, one of the things I love that they do, you and your wife, because you guys have a podcast. It's called the Your Living Proof podcast. And I said, number one, I love how bold they are. They are bold. We are not sugarcoating this for anyone. We're here to help. And you can tell they are all in to help, but they're not going to dance around the subject. They're going to be direct. We are hitting this hard. But one of my favorite things that you guys do so well is you separate the addict from the disease and you show the family you're talking to a disease. You're not talking to your family member. When they're talking to you and they're threatening or they're, manipulating you, that's not them, that's the disease.
Guess what? There's probably a few, I'd say quite a few, men especially, I'm going to say it because we're the worst, who are listening to that, who are like, yeah, okay, but cannot apply it to their loved one. If there's any of you listening out there who heard that but just can't apply it, here's the best way to understand this, because there's still a lot of people, especially people of good faith, like good God-fearing people. They believe in this thing that we've all been given called agency. It is ours and we can always exercise it. Now, thankfully, in the last years, despite all the horrible things that happen in the world, there's a lot of things that are positive, and they've understood this disease a lot more, and they're able to look at the brain and see how it's actually neurologically rewiring it and that it is a disease of the brain. But the best thing to help them understand is it didn't start that way, right? Somebody could have started from trauma or a stupid decision like mine, but along the way, the agency and the ability to choose is gone. Exactly when that happens, I don't know.
Right.
It does differ for a lot of people. But if you look at your loved one in the state they're living, sometimes people just almost look at their loved one with like a disgust or like, how pathetic is this? Or maybe then they think like, what's wrong with you? What like is actually wrong with you? Your loved one isn't choosing that. They've lost their ability to choose.
Yeah.
It it's really hard though. So to your point, when we say separate the person you love from the disease that's trying to kill them, sometimes people have a hard time with that because they feel like we're condoning the behavior. And
Oh.
the challenge here is if you actually understand the disease concept of addiction and you can take out, there's this thing called clinical uniqueness in my world that every family who starts our program has this clinical uniqueness where
Oh,
they're somehow different than other people. Well, the disease of addiction takes millions of people who are different and it morphs them into the same thing. Speaking to the disease isn't to condone what they're doing, it's to help you stop taking it so personal. Because parents or spouses, once their loved one has developed this disease, they've lost their agency. Like there's a woman in our group, I love her, and she created this alter ego for her husband. And she, like his alter ego was Jose. And it's like at times, and she would say it with like this little lisp, and it was helpful, right? Some people would be like, oh, you're just excusing his behavior. And we're like, absolutely not. It just allowed her to separate the disease from the person she loves, to know who she's speaking to, so that
yeah.
she could hold those boundaries, so that she could put in place the action that she needed to get change. Because otherwise, it felt like a personal attack on her.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where families, even to moms and dads listening, it's like that's what I hate about this disease is it's the only fatal illness on the face of the planet where families not only argue or disagree about what to do, but where the sick person fights to stay sick. It makes me crazy because when it comes to other very difficult things we face in life, like cancer, diabetes, some of these difficult fatal illnesses, as excruciating and painful as that is, it follows some type of reason. We unify, we don't differ in our opinion, we don't fail to act, we don't blame ourselves for what could have or should have been different. We just get to work. Well, with this, we look at it as a thing of choice, of behavior. We blame ourselves. We look at other circumstances. I think what helps people realize is, I'm sorry that you missed the opportunity long time ago to grab this when it was some dumb choices. But the trick with addiction is nobody catches it because it lives in secrecy. So by the time you find out is often when it's transitioned from choice to a loss of agency, from stupid decisions to the disease of addiction. They have to separate it because people cannot start taking the necessary steps they need to intervene until they stop separate the person from the disease. It's a critical one.
And that's because it's feelings. It's feelings, it's relationships, it's I love my kid. I can't set a boundary with them because who else is gonna help them? I'm their parent. It's my responsibility to help them, but they're just their help is actually caught it's continuing. It's continuing the addiction, and this is why I love what you guys do so much. Honestly, this is why I'm so happy you're on here because I'm like, this is what needs to be out there more and more and more is because nobody is trained to do this except for you. And who better, but I would want to talk to you if I was in this position because you can speak from experience of, let me tell you who I had to manipulate. Let me tell you how I did this and why I was so desperate because in their brain, their thought for the day is not being sick.
It's consumes them. It either they're enjoying it for just a moment or they're completely consumed with how to obtain it again. And most of that's driven by fear of not having it because when they don't, they know the discomfort. So it's
Well, and I was talking to my husband about it. I said, and then you think, why wouldn't they want to go to rehab? You offer it. There has to be, and I don't know that I've heard you talk about this part of it, but there has to be in my brain this fear of, I know how painful that's going to be.
yeah. The physical part at first is
Yeah.
before they have a chance to figure out why, they have to overcome the physical discomfort. And I think if people put their expectations in check about rehab, I think we've come to this place where sending someone to rehab is supposed to fix them. It's absolutely not. These poor places, believe it or not, insurance is paying for it now like never before. But all it is to help them get over that excruciating couple weeks of discomfort physically,
Yeah.
physically. But yet they come home and we expect that they had time to do spiritual and emotional healing. Absolutely not. They don't even know their name basically by the time they leave. But it's just our perception of this is different. People don't realize what it takes to overcome addiction. And if they're listening in, it's time. And it's all the steps of recovery that are necessary. And there's really two principles I wanted to share it if you don't mind. If a family is dealing with this, in all the years I've been doing this, I feel like these two principles, they may seem minimal, but they are the most transformative principles I've found for families, right? We're not talking about the person in addiction. We all know that they need help. Let's just
Yeah.
put that to bed.
Yeah.
The greatest lie about addiction is that they have to want it for themselves. This, it is absolute nonsense. You'll hear people in religious positions, even psychiatrists, even hear people at treatment centers, well, they're going to have to want it. Like every old grandpa, they're going to have to want to change. They're going to baloney. No one has ever gone into a program of recovery and started the process of healing because they wanted it for themselves.
Yeah.
So the truth is, in order to recover and do the work necessary to heal, they will have to want it for themselves. But it's never what gets the process started. The reason why this lie is so powerful, there are millions of families out there, like yours at some point, mine at some point, who are kind of waiting for this person that's sick to just wake up and want it for themselves. Someone or something has to intervene,
Yeah.
right? For a
Yeah.
lot of people, they're fortunate that finally a judge intervenes. And it's like, well, you have to go to a program for 2 years or you're going to go sit in a jail. Guess what? Those programs of like year or two have an extremely high success rate. Like
Yeah.
people are in there long enough that they have time to heal. So outside of a judge, the only other options are we wait till they die or a family learns how to intervene. And I know I say that where people are like, geez, you sound heartless. That's the truth. It's
Yep.
the absolute truth. So someone or something has to intervene. Now, once you do, maybe after a few days or a few weeks, all of a sudden your loved one wants it for themselves. But don't wait for that to be the day that starts this process. I feel like if more families could actually adhere to that and put action, because here's what happens. As soon as the family's like, okay, they go to take action by putting in place boundaries, and their fear is that by doing so, it's going to make it worse. Boundaries have never killed anyone on this planet. Addiction does that. But the second principle is, and I feel like anybody of a faith-based family, please, hardest one, and yet I still have yet to meet a family who fully will accept this, but most of them eventually do, is that what you know is the tip of the iceberg. Now, I spend a lot of my days working with families, and in the very beginning is convincing them, hey guys, I know you're really concerned. I know this horrible thing just happened. I know that you've discovered X, Y, and Z, but you are literally just seeing the crumbs that they dropped. People get offended by it sometimes, and almost like, how dare you sit here and try to tell me it's worse? I'm already losing sleep. Like, our family's already being ravaged. The reason it's important, because it's the truth. If you speak to anyone in recovery, myself or anyone else, they'll tell you the family never knew, maybe most, like 25, 30% of what was going on. Even if they're in your home and you see the mess, you only know to an extent. So why is this important? It's the why. If families could come to realize, because it's that clinical uniqueness. Well, not our Timmy. Like, Timmy's just looking at porn and just smoking weed. No. If families realized you've now caught the crumbs they dropped when they were sloppy, why this is empowering instead of discouraging is you stop doubting yourself. You stop thinking that you're overreacting. And families can step up and say, you know what? We understand this is worse than we probably realize. Let's do something. Instead, they wait till things get so blatantly bad that it's like they're arrested or they just overdosed. That's where so many families look back and they saw signs. They knew there were signs. So I think it's a good principle that when families can take that to heart, it's not meant to just discourage you that things are worse. Like, they are worse than you know. So let's stop living in fear and let's do something about it. Those are just two that I think are really fundamentally helpful.
They're so good. I love you. I heard this again on your podcast. You know, talking to families. If you're waiting for your loved one to show up to Sunday dinner and say, "We got to talk. I've decided I need to get help. It's time. I'd really love your help." You know, and I unfortunately they really are. It sounds funny, but they really are on the inside waiting and hoping, praying for that moment that is not coming. It's just not coming. They again, their focus is not being sick today. And so if that means they're coming to your house, watch your stuff, you know, and watch, you know, how they get what they need, you know, because they're now like they are the walking disease at this point. And that's their only focus. And I think it's so hard for families to be manipulated and to feel like I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they stole from me. I can't, and again, that's the disease. That's the disease. That's not your kid. That's the disease running your kid.
It's the truth. It's, I think when people start to come to realize this, and thankfully there's more resources and things available, it starts to become a little bit more clear of the situations, because otherwise most families live in this, they live really naive and they don't do it intentionally.
Yeah.
It actually, families live in it longer. You know, yours probably did, mine did, where it's like, we love this person. Like, our family is different than coming these typical places where people with addictions come from, but
Yeah.
they just can't see it for what it is. They see it for what they would like it to be.
Yeah.
And I would like to just like bear a very humble, honest testimony to anybody listening out there. Addiction is absolutely brutal. And I think the word itself, addiction, is hard for some people to relate to. If you need to use dependency that helps you feel more connected, great. But there is some type of dependency existing in almost every home with someone in their home. And we always look for the best. We always kind of bury our head in the sand. These things don't go away. We sometimes correlate it to like seasonal depression, or like when our kids were going through tough teenage years or something. Stop living in that naive place, please. Don't be afraid to do something. Your loved one is incapable of doing this for themselves. If you wait for them, you're going to be waiting forever. Families have got to step up. And I think if you overcome the fear that even if you do take action, if you put boundaries in place, certain things that you do cause it to get worse, you're actually doing them a service. Because until the consequences start showing up in their life, they're going to live in this delusional place that nothing's wrong. And so are you. That's the part that's super hard. And I just wish more families would act sooner, because most of the people that are doing something about this are the families where it's gotten really, really bad. And you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait. And you don't have to doubt yourself that it's, to me, if you describe your loved one's dependency or addiction with the word just, you have the biggest problem. Well, they're just smoking weed,
Yeah.
or they're just, they just have a pornography problem. The most deadly and dangerous addiction out there is the one that people use the word just right before. I think people are clearly understanding we live in a different time. Like, even by the way, like I have heard more horror stories about people ending up in psych wards and psychiatric units dealing with psychosis and delusion of marijuana than I used to off people with LSD and methamphetamines. Um, we live in a different day and age. Like when I was younger, you had to be lucky to find the greatest marijuana on the planet that had like 10% potency, right? Now doctors are giving you stuff that you go get this 20 to 30 to 40% potency. So it's not even the same drug.
Yeah.
We just, our standards of society have collapsed as well, where we just look at it and it's like, well, gosh, there's all these people doing this and they're just doing this.
I think we're all, in a sense, in our own ways, unless we're really actively working on focusing on this, we're all kind of numb in a way. We find a way to numb out, whether it's the phone, whether it's, whatever it is, we're doing something. We found something that's going to help us not feel or think about real life for a little bit, you know? And unless you're at it's like in our day and age, you have to be actively focused on not doing that, on being purposeful about our attention. But man, okay. So, and I remember you talking about when we were talking about the withdrawals and everything like that. I heard you in another podcast talking about how bad that was for you, that you actually did that a few times. Like you ended up going back. And, I think if we can just acknowledge that and give them a little bit of grace on that, just get in their head a little bit of like, no, they're heading for pain. They're heading for pain, and that's why they're fighting you on this. It's
That's
not,
exactly why they're fighting.
yeah, they're not looking past that to how great life could be in the freedom. They can't get past that. And that's where that tough love does come in. Of I can see that for you.
Yep. You just used a word that's the most meaningful to me. So recovery was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was the greatest thing to ever happen in my life, without a doubt. I would be a shell of a father. I'd be a shell of a husband. I would just be a shell of a brother, shell of a neighbor, had I not gone through it. Like I would have actually been like, gosh dang, I'm so lucky. And my family's so lucky because they went through recovery with me, where we learned how to talk. We learned how to acknowledge feelings. We learned how to, for help. We learned how to empathize. We learned how to be honest and self-accountable. I wouldn't have learned those tools anywhere else
Yeah.
outside of recovery. I didn't learn it in school, scouts, sports, church, even. That's where I had to learn it. So it was like this opportunity. So I think sometimes families look at this situation as it's like so terrible or embarrassing, or gosh, no, I'm sorry to say you're gonna have to do something heroic and difficult. You, the family. The family doesn't understand that it actually falls on their shoulders to do something, and I know it's unfair. I know it's backwards. I know your loved one should be the one making the choice, but they can't. Like if I was able to like be a vessel for anyone out there, if it's a grandson, a daughter, a sister, husband, a wife, the healthy version, like the true identity of the person you love, if they were able to speak through their addiction right now, through the dependency that they have, this is what they would say. Every day I want this to go away. And I've tried to do it on my own, but I can't. I'm living with such anxiety, fear, shame, and absolute horror that I'm terrified. almost daily, I want nothing more than this, but my need to get high is like identical to your need to breathe. The truth is during my addiction, I've lost not only track of who I am, but I no longer love myself. I'm absolutely terrified of dying, but I don't want to die. Here's the scary part that's really confusing is they want your help, but they don't want your help. And they're not going to be able to escape this without you. So please, families, everyone, listen, stop waiting. Stop thinking that we just have to wait till they hit this bottom and eventually wake up. We're going to have to come together as a family, put boundaries in place. And what's hard is people are like, what is that? What is the boundary? What is the boundary? What is the boundary? Sometimes we do have to say, no, we're not safe with this anymore. But we clearly communicate with them that on the other side of this in recovery, we are all in. We understand the steps you're going to have to take. We're going to support you through them. That way they can see what they're willing to do, but we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the more families who come to this realization and get the help to do this, it doesn't mean we can save everyone, but statistically, we can do a lot better than we're doing. When I told you that Department of Human Health and Services, the most recent report came out of those 46 million known people with addiction, 95.2% of them never get the proper help they need. And the number one reason why, this is the best part, it's not like resources or like being able to find the help. It's the number one reason is they didn't feel like they needed it.
Wow.
I could even send you a link. People go research it and find them themselves. So in context, it's pretty funny because you're like, well, none of them think they need it. Like none of them think they need the help. That's the delusion of the disease telling them that. So I just have made it my life mission. And I just find, when families do this, to me, it's a win no matter what. And hopefully it's a win-win and your loved one gets into recovery.
Yeah.
But I've made it my life mission that I should have died for mine. Like I literally should have died many times. But I think about what would have happened to my family? So what I hope is that every family can do this because it does give their loved one a chance.
Yeah.
But even if something unfortunate happened with their loved one, that at that time in their life, the family knew we had spoken to this. We were aware of it. We had a plan in place. We were all on the same page. We were speaking the same thing over and over, providing solutions for them. So even if it did happen, worst case scenario, and we lost a loved one, the family knows without a doubt that we did everything we could. There's no coulda, shoulda, wouldas. I wish we would have done this. And families deserve that. And most importantly, your healthy loved one wants that for you. Like I have to speak that to families every day and reminding them that their loved one, healthy, wants them to be happy, doesn't want them to endure this. They don't need to tolerate certain things.
Yeah.
But it's just really hard when you're in it yourself, and everyone who has a loved one addicted to something is going to have to get support themselves and parallel their loved one into recovery for them to have a chance.
That's so powerful. I am so grateful that you were willing to come on here and talk. I mean, I knew it would be good because I've like devoured all the stuff that you guys post, and I'm like, this is just people need to hear this. This is what people need to be hearing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, and thanks for what you do.
For everyone listening, please go follow. It's Your Living Proof on Instagram, and Your Living Proof, is it yourlivingproof.com?
Yeah, yourlivingproof.com, and it's YOUR Living Proof, all one word, is our website. And actually, on that note, like anyone listening in, we're about 2 weeks away from launching our free community. It's something we've been working on for a year. We've actually found a lot of people to help fund and donate some resources where there's a lot of people out there whose loved ones affected them in a way financially that they can't afford professional help. There's going to be so many resources and classes and lessons and tools that they can go get for free. So if they go on our website and fill out a little form, it'll notify them as soon as that community is there so they can access it. Totally yours, and the podcast is free as well.
Yes, please go listen to the podcast. It's so good. You will get the information you need. It's not sugar coated. It is given right to you. You can't get it. There's no second guessing what you need to do. It's so clear and it's so powerful. And like I said, if we would have had you years ago, we would have used you for sure. I'm just grateful you're doing it now. So thank you.